Dover very much enjoyed pastimes and good company, and so for him the games were recreational rather than competitive. He apparently stated that they were this mirth, this jollity. The games took place on open land on an escarpment above the Vale of Evesham, which included a natural amphitheatre in Western Sub-Edge, which they called Kingcombe Plain. In those days, it might be a bit out of the way now, but actually it had good communications back in the day. Convention set country activities in ancient Greek landscapes, with the pastoral genre of Arcadian shepherds being very popular. Dover used real shepherds and involved the local gentry in reenactments of Greek games. The centrepiece was a portable wooden Dover castle, which was dismantled after the games and stored for the following year. It incorporated cannons that loudly fired blanks with real gunpowder, which back in those days required royal permission. I can't really imagine why, given what Guy Fawkes had been up to. The games didn't strictly reflect the Greek Olympics and were annual rather than every 4 years. But by 1636, the term Olympic was fully accepted, which helped avoid any religious connotations. Dover firmly controlled proceedings. His position was signalled by riding a horse while wearing the king's second-hand clothes, including a hat, feather, and a ruff. This sent a powerful message highlighting royal patronage. Clothes reflected occupation, religious beliefs, and social status. They no doubt were given to him by the king, they were no doubt given by the king to Porter, who I just mentioned, who then passed them on to Dover to encourage his enterprise. Clothing was valuable in the 17th century and not thrown away, regularly being left in people's wills. Also, the king had clothes to spare. One 5-year period saw him buy 60 new cloaks, over 8 waistcoats, a new suit every 10 days, a new pair of stockings, boots and garters every 4 or 5 days, and a new pair of gloves every day. What would he have done if there was a Matalan or a Primark back then? The games were inclusive, bringing the rich and the poor together to enable social harmony. The feasting ensured that the lower orders were also fed. Dover provided favours and prizes for event winners, silver awards for the gentry for certain sports to be returned each year. Shepherds and workers received money as prizes. And whereas Greeks were naked or in full armour during sports, the English competed wearing doublet and hose. The lower class sports included running, leaping, wrestling, spurning the bar, which is a bit like tossing the caber, back swords, which was a martial sport with wooden sword and dagger, throwing the sledge or the hammer, and headstands. The wrestling evolved into a very localized version known as shin kicking, where the referees were known as sticklers, which is believed to have led to the phrase, a stickler for the rules. The upper class sports, Dover needed activities to attract the gentry, and so he arranged for horse racing, hunting, and coursing. These helped elevate the Olympics above church ales, where the sports of kings did not take place. Records describe a narrow course of 2.5 miles, which I don't think can be traced necessarily today, which necessitated heats with limited numbers of horses in each heat. Hunting would have involved hounds with prey, such as fox, which would have been captured in advance and then released to be hunted. Similarly, coursing would have involved captured hares. Other activities included dancing, a Troy town turf maze, and tents for low-stake card games. The games came to an end with the English Civil War. Many who participated of all classes suffered disease and loss of life or property. Dover was 60 when the war started, and he probably stayed at home throughout. He died at the age of 70, the year before Oliver Cromwell became protector. The Olympics returned, along with other country celebrations following the Restoration in 1660. But without Dover's controlling hand, they deteriorated over time with occasional riots. They arguably were no better than the general drunken country festivals that were taking place. Activities were of lesser status as well. For example, a woman's race for the prize of a smock, a donkey race, cockfighting, bowling, and blind man's buff. It was written that from 1846 onwards, the games, instead of being decorously conducted as originally intended, became, quote, the trysting place of all the lowest scum of the population which lived in the districts lying between Birmingham and Oxford. The enclosure of the common land on which the games were held marked their end in 1862. The section of the hill with the large slopes survived the enclosure as pasture and woodland. When it was up for sale in 1929, a local artist outbid developers at an auction. It subsequently being given to the National Trust after an appeal raised for the necessary funds. The games were revived in 1951, the year of the Festival of Britain, and took place on the hill. And they featured equestrian sports, boxing, tug of war, donkey races, and foot races, plus some modern equivalents to 19th century games such as pillow fights, climbing the greasy pole, horseshoe throwing, coconut shies, and bowling for a pig. But arguably the most popular survival was shin kicking. Since 1964, the games form part of the Scuttlebrook Wake Festival season in Chipping Campden and include a mock castle in honour of Dover's original. There are gymkhana events, motorcycle displays, and similar, with the most bizarre including wire flonking, piano smashing, sack racing in huge sacks, parachute jumping, and Morris dancing with a hobby horse. Current games include King of the Hill, which is a kind of pentathlon, Championship of the Hill, teams of 6 in a series of frantic and very wet games, running races, tug of war, and shin kicking, which is run as the World Shin Kicking Championships. The Olympics take place on the Friday evening of the Whitsun week, although obviously the COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact. Okay, well, that's the story of the Olympic Games. We will now move on with the next slide, which is about the very strange Olympian events. Thank you. Okay. Next slide, please. The Much Wenlock. Much Wenlock is in Shropshire, for those of you who are not that familiar with it. Or as my dad called it, Much Wedlock. He was recovering in hospital there for quite some time. Anyway, the Much Wenlock Olympian Games were inspired by the modern Olympic Games. Dr. William Penny Brooks invited Baron and Coubertin to special games in 1890, and Coubertin wrote, "If the Olympic Games that modern Greece has not yet been able to revive still survives today, it is due not to a Greek, but to Dr. William Penny Brooks." He later wrote, "The Wenlock people alone have preserved and followed the true Olympian traditions." Next slide, please. Coubertin was so impressed that he adopted several of Much Wenlock's games, ideas, and practices, which actually you will recognize in today's Olympics. There's the incorporation of Nike, I'm never really sure which way to pronounce it, the winged goddess of victory into Olympic medals, imagery of crowns of olive leaves, as with Olympic winners in ancient Greece, pageantry processions of flag bearers, competitors and officials with Olympian hymns and oaths, artistic events, which were part of the games from 1912 to 48, and moving the games from town to town with the host town funding the games. Next one, please. Now this photo, I've got this, something continuing in the middle of my screen. That's bad. This photo, which is taken of the Olympian Games at Much Wenlock in 1867, is actually believed to be the first photograph of, or the earliest photograph of a sporting event in the world. Next one, please. Right. The objects of the games were to benefit not only the body, but also the mind. So there were prizes for the 3 R's of school, which reading, writing, and arithmetic, and also for the 3 R's of athletics, running, riding, and wrestling. Right, next slide, please. These are the arts events. As you can see, I mentioned some of them already: arithmetic, best odes or poems, the brass band contest, drawing or glee singing, knitting, particularly knitting stockings, making a shirt, sewing, scripture history. Yeah, it was all good fun there. Okay, next slide, please. Athletics. You can see here there's climbing a 55-foot rope, cycling on penny farthings. This was very popular. The first winner apparently trained by giving up smoking. Nowadays, vintage cycle racing on penny farthings takes place, and it absolutely wows the crowds. Egg and spoon race, hopping 50 yards on one leg, but also there's this putting a quarry stone. That might sound a bit strange, but it was a special event aimed at the men who worked in the local limestone quarries. The stone weighed 56 pounds, half a hundredweight, compared to current men's shot put of 16 pounds, so about 3.5 times the weight. The competition required throwing the stone with one hand in a similar way to the current shot put, and then he was required to throw the stone again, but with his other hand. The winner was the man whose combined distance was the greatest. Now, as you would say, that is a real trial of strength. Other events, as you can see, the regatta, sack race, throwing a cricket ball, tug of war, and a Zulu contest. Now, the origins of the Zulu contest are self-evident. And some people these days actually want darts to be an Olympic sport, but dart players they're mere wimps compared to anybody having to hit a target with an assegai from about 60 feet. Next, please. Right. The military were big in those days, as we well know, and there were a lot of linked events, all of them on horseback. There was the balaclava melee, which was a mounted mock brawl in which soldiers armed with single sticks attempted to knock plumes from each other's helmets. I think the gimcrack race sounds absolutely brilliant, and I think it should be brought back. You race along, you stop the horse, you dismount, put your boots on, jump, drink, smoke a cigar, and repeat at set intervals. What about horseback wrestling? I mean, I think that's a brilliant drawing by Hunt. And then the tent pegging. Now, this might seem a bit strange, but it involves spearing a series of small wooden pegs driven into the ground. Points were scored according to whether the peg remained intact. This feat derived from daring riders charging into hostile camps and literally spearing out the tent pegs, thereby trapping their enemies inside the collapsing canopies. The Victoria cross race was a competition over fences where riders had to collect man-sized dummies, usually filled with straw, which represented wounded men that they were to rescue, put them over the horses with us, and then gallop home. The top event was called tilting at the ring, which I'll show you a picture in a minute, and isn't necessarily what some of you might be thinking. It's constantly described as being the most popular, reportedly attracting a crowd of 10,000 in 1876. It recreated the practice of knights jousting tournaments with mounted horsemen charging under a frame on which hung a small metal ring. Next slide, please, and show you a picture of it. There you are. So as you can see, he's got a lance or a spear, and he's just getting a small ring, which is barely noticeable on it, but you can actually just about see it. The objective was to dislodge the ring with the lance and keep it there until the horseman passed under the frame. In later years, the event increased in difficulty with hurdles introduced. Next slide, please. This is the presentation to the winner. The gentleman to the right of the lady who's presenting the prize to the kneeling man is Penny Brooks himself. Okay, next slide, please. And there were some fun events, right? Although the games program steadily increased throughout the first decade, it was evident that their success with the public, at least in part, was in the less serious competitions. Brooks organised them primarily for entertainment and to attract people to attend, with some of them being for all ages. In 1854, a blindfold wheelbarrow race took place, and it has to be stressed that it was the men pushing that were blindfolded and not the wheelbarrows. Unfortunately, I have not been able to establish whether the blindfolded men raced on their own or whether partners sat in the wheelbarrow issuing directions. It was reported that one winner of the blindfolded wheelbarrow race somersaulted over a hedge at the end to celebrate. Presumably, he took his blindfold off first. No information about how many politicians took part in climbing a greasy pole. And the jingling match was a kind of blind man's buff with bells and involved blindfolded children chasing a man who had bells about his person. The child that caught him was the winner. If this were repeated today, it would probably present a health and safety nightmare. In 1856, there was an old ladies' race for a pound of tea, the only time women competed in games under Brooks's guise. This was not, as some might surmise from the description, a race where old women chased around after a pound of tea, with it being somehow raised aloft. The tea was the then valuable prize for a foot race. The elderly woman who won it was a 45-year-old called Mary Speak, with 38-year-old Anne Meredith in second place. Prison Base was a game of medieval origins played by two teams, effectively a serial tag race, tag game. The first team sent out a player, then the second team sent out a player to tag the first team's player, followed by the first team sending out a player to tag the second team's player, and so on. The goal was to tag out the other team's players before they reached their designated home. Played by both adults and children, it was so popular with some citizens of 14th century London that Edward III banned it from the grounds of his palace at Westminster, because the games were so noisy and rambunctious that they distracted his government ministers in their work. Sounds all right to me. Arguably the most bizarre was the pig chase. A report stated the pig started in the middle of the field and led its pursuers over hedge and ditch right into town, where it took ground in the cellar of Mr. Blakeway's house, and where it was captured by a man named William Hill. What was the betting of that? The prize was for the winner to take the pig home with him. I couldn't find out what Mr. Hill did with the pig, but pork scratchings have always been a West Midlands delicacy. Next slide, please. And I did say that it was weird. This is Wenlock from the 2012 London Games. I can't really think of a much weirder design than that. Next slide, please. Power to the King. We're moving on to football now. In 2016, Leicester City completed a football fairy tale by winning the English Premier League. What was it that won them the ultimate prize? Next slide. Was it the goals of Jamie Vardy? Next slide. Or was it the silky skills of Riyad Mahrez? Next slide. Or was it the defensive strength of Robert Huth and Wes Morgan? Next slide. None of them. It was the intervention and influence of King Richard III, who you can see here wearing his kit and obviously celebrating having scored a goal. Next slide, please. And they won the Premier League, and you can see him there just behind the trophy. Next slide, please. Now, one moment. Oh, I've lost the slide. Yeah, in ancient Greece, have we gone to? Sorry, can you just go back there, please, CJ? Have we gone on to? It's okay. No, carry on. Sorry, I've lost a slide of my own here. In ancient Greece, a city or sanctuary might claim the remains of a venerated hero as part of a hero cult. Bones not usually regarded as holding particular power derived from the hero. I apologise. I've juggled the slides a bit here. So I'm taking stock. Back to the football fairy tale. Unfashionable Leicester City, also known as the Foxes. Can you just go back to the previous slide, please, CJ? Sorry about this. Yeah. They won the Premier League title in 2015-16. It was the first time in their 132-year history. And they beat mega-rich big city clubs, but they narrowly avoided relegation in 2014-15, which was the first year back in the Premier League for over 10 years. They were 5,000 to 1 to win the Premiership at the start of the season. The manager was the short price favourite to be the first manager sacked. So how might Richard III have actually played a part? After all, he was killed at Bosworth Field in Leicestershire in 1485. It was thought that there might be a link to the discovery of his skeleton under a social services car park bay in August 2012. A Thai-led consortium bought Leicester City in August 2010. It was fronted by Vishay, it's a hell of a name to pronounce this, Shrivadhana Prabha. Apologies if I've got that wrong. A billionaire businessman, founder and CEO of a company which had a 3-year shirt sponsorship deal with the club. The company's name was the King Power Group. The group bought the naming rights to the club's ground for the 2011-12 season, and it became the King Power Stadium. So there were some changes at Leicester. Excuse me. In 2011-12, Leicester City languished in mid-table in the second division. Second-tier championship. They changed the names of the divisions these days. But it was at the end of 2011-12 that Richard's remains were found. From there on in, Leicester City went onwards and upwards. They reached the playoffs in 2012-13 and won the championship in 2013-14, gaining promotion to the Premier League. Promotion coincided with, in May 2014, a judicial decision that Richard should be reburied in Leicester rather than York. Those advocating York ignored the fact that Richard was born in Fotheringay in Northamptonshire, just over the Leicestershire border. So Leicester City was the nearest top-tier club to his birthplace. They were his local team. In 2014-15, they had a terrible start. They were bottom of the table on 21st of March 2015 after losing 4-3 to Spurs, 7 points off safety. They'd drawn 2 and lost 6 of their previous 8 games. Played 29, won 4, that's all. Drawn 7, lost 18. The very next day, 22nd of March, Richard III was reburied in Leicester Cathedral, a mile from King Power Stadium, following great ceremony akin a state funeral. It was great, I was there. From there on in, Leicester City won 7 of their last 9 games, taking 22 points from a possible 27, the best form in the Premiership. They ended up finishing 14th, 6 points above the team relegated in 17th place, which was Hull. This was Championship winning form. And then they ended up the following season. They played 38 games, won 23, drawn 12, lost 3, points 81. The form over 47 matches after Richard III's burial was played 47, won 30, drawn 13, lost only 4. A phenomenal turnaround. So, what was Richard III's influence? We can now look at the next slide, please. Sorry about getting itself juggled up. CJ. Next slide, please. That's it. In ancient Greece, a city or sanctuary might claim the remains of a venerated hero as a part of a hero cult. Bones not usually regarded as holding particular power derived from the hero. Their presence served as a tutelary function, acting as a deity or spirit who is a guardian, patron, or protector of the place. E.g., the tomb of Oedipus was said to protect Athens. When Richard III had a proper tomb where people could pay their respects, maybe he began playing his role for his local city and his football team. Next slide, please. Next one, CJ. No, back on. Sorry, back. Sorry, I must have edited out the wrong ones here.
No,
Okay.
there's a time gap between me pressing the button.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. Anyway, that's the spirit. Football became prominent in the early Middle Ages when the first bouncing balls were invented. There's a possibility that Richard III had an interest in the game when he was alive. Certainly, if his spirit survived death and maintained an interest in the sport, it will have been delighted to have been reburied in Leicester rather than York. York City were relegated from the lowest tier of the Football League at the same time as the Foxes were raising the Premiership trophy. Is it correct? Of course it is. Of course, anyone can make spurious links between different things to make up a tenuous argument. Perish the thought that a lifelong Ricardian who lived in Leicester for over 3 years should stoop to such terrible, terrible practices. Right, thank you. We now move on to the next slide and the curse of Aaron Ramsey.
Okay, do you want the video now or?
No. We'll just next slide, please. Headline: Robin Williams dies. Aaron Ramsey scores. Has the Arsenal stars curse returned? Next slide. Curse of Aaron Ramsey. David Bowie and Alan Rickman die as Arsenal star scores. Wow, what is this all about? Next slide, please. Who is Aaron Ramsey? He's a Welsh footballer born in 1990. He played midfield for Arsenal in the English Football League, Premier League, and the Wales national football team. Arsenal signed him for £5 million in 2008 from his hometown club of Cardiff City. But what on earth can this curse be? Next slide, please. Whenever Aaron scores a goal, a big-name celebrity dies. The strange phenomenon became apparent throughout 2011 and 12. Osama bin Laden declared dead on May 2011, the day after Aaron Ramsey scored against Manchester United. Steve Jobs died in California on the 5th of October 2011, the weekend following Aaron's scoring in the North London derby against Spurs. Libyan leader Colonel Gaddafi captured by rebels on the 20th of October 2011 when Aaron got the late winner against Marseille. And Whitney Houston was found dead in her bathroom just hours after Aaron scored against Sunderland in February 2012. And hours after scoring in the 2014 Community Shield, the death of comedy actor Robin Williams was announced. Next slide, please. More recent examples were Fast and Furious actor of Paul Walker, David Bowie, Richard Attenborough, Alan Rickman. How can he be so callous? Next slide, please. Ha ha ha, evil laughter. And this is where CJ plays a video for you.
Open an account.
Can you see this?
I can't, but can they?
I don't know. Can anyone see this? Hang on. Give me a second. I will see if I can get this to work. It was working fine last time I tried. Here we go. Where's it gone? Oh, I can't see it now. Oh, for goodness sake. Give me a second. Here we go. Okay, can everybody see this?
And get at least 10% off life. It's
Yeah.
that easy.
No, that's just the advert. Wait until
With
it's
the rewards
finished.
program from Booking.com.
Aaron Ramsey's
There we go.
death. When Arsenal's Aaron Ramsey gets near the goal, famous people around the world get nervous. Because each time he scores, a well-known celebrity dies. When Ramsey netted against United Manchester in May last year, Osama bin Laden bit the bullet. When he hit the net against Spurs in October, Steve Jobs passed away shortly after. His goal against Sunderland last week precluded the death of diva Whitney Houston. Whose turn will it be the next time Ramsey hits the target? Yay!
Is that the end of it?
Oops. Subscribe to our channel. Come on over.
Okay.
So now, hang on.
I hope you enjoyed that. I thought that was quite funny.
Right, I'm coming back to the thing.
Okay.
Now. Oh, where was I last time? From current slide. Resume slideshow.
Yeah. Evil laughter.
Hang on, I've got a cat trying to do something behind me.
I am ticklish.
There's no answer to that.
In some places. If I were to get marooned on an island,
Right, okay, it's playing something in the background.
current or past, would I take with me and why? I would probably
What's
take
Marmalade? Stop doing that, you bad kitten.
past player. Past
Right,
player,
this is a
manual
football player called Kieran Gibbs saying Aaron Ramsey's the worst FIFA player.
Oh, it's just running onto the next YouTube.
Yeah, I'm just turning it off in the background. Right, okay, we're back to the presentation now. Can everyone see this?
I can.
Okay, good.
And this is his answer. It's all rubbish. There is no curse of Aaron Ramsey.
Marmalade.
There. That's so. Next slide, please.
Yeah, 1 second. I'm just coming back.
Oh, don't tell me you're chasing the cat.
Cat, no. I'll send you to Buenos Aires. Right, okay, coming over. Sorry about that.
And this is going to be on YouTube for everybody to watch. Oh.
Yeah, he ran off with my dinner. Right,
Oh,
okay,
dear.
problem solved.
Right. Basically, there are so many celebrities in this world that at least one of them will die every day. So every time Aaron Ramsey scored, a celebrity will always die around that time. What's the likely explanation? Arsenal supporters chatting over a pint. They discuss Aaron Ramsey's limited number of goals at the time. He scores a couple around the time of Jobs and Gaddafi's deaths, and a jokey comment about the coincidence. The joke gets passed on and becomes an urban legend. Journalists just cannot resist using it. Next one, please. proof. I identified a celebrity who died within a day of each of the 36 matches where Aaron scored between the 21st of October 2008 and the 23rd of August 2014. There are 4,500 and 21,900 deaths in UK and USA, respectively, for every 3-day period. Life in Legacy website lists around 30 to 40 famous people who've died each week. The lists of deaths by year, some great websites, has over 10 deaths for each day. Inevitably, a couple of dozen celebrities die on the 3 days surrounding an Aaron Ramsey goal. So there is no curse of Aaron Ramsey. Sorry to disappoint you.
Oh.
So, next one, please. And we move on to the curse of Bela Guttman, not Luggosi. Now, that's him on the left, and that's him on the right as well, where you see that he's actually clutching the 2 European Cup trophies. And in the middle is an eagle. Why? Well, that will become fairly obvious in a bit. But who was he? He was born in 1899 and died in 1981. He was a Jewish Hungarian footballer and coach. He had a psychology degree and was a trained dance instructor, which is a unique combination. Prior to World War II, he played in midfield for MTK Hungary, SC Hakea in Vienna, I'm hoping to pronounce that correctly, and several clubs in the USA. Members of the Hungary national football team. He was a member which played in the 1924 Paris Olympic Games. He managed the all-Jewish SC Hakea Vienna club and also Dutch SC and Schende. He won the Hungarian League with Újpest in the 1938-39 season. Then, unfortunately and unsurprisingly, he lost his job because of anti-Jewish laws of the Hungarian government. And the Nazi occupation of Hungary in March 1944 put him in a forced labor camp where he was tortured. He escaped in December 1944. Otherwise, he would have gone to Auschwitz, where his elderly father, older sister, and wider family were murdered. He was a strong-minded coach and arguably an eternal maverick. After World War II, he returned to coaching in Romania and Hungary, managed Újpest again to a league-winning success in 1947. At his next club, Kispest, he wanted to take off a fullback because he was furious at this player's ungentlemanly play. But this would have reduced the team to 10 players. The team captain was Ferenc Puskás, who was later at Honvéd and Real Madrid. And Puskás actually encouraged the fullback to stay on the pitch. Guttman therefore retired to the stands, read a racing paper, and refused to coach the team. He quit on the spot. Next was a series of short-term coaching jobs in Italy, Cyprus, and South America, before taking Porto to the Portuguese league title in 1959. He immediately switched to Lisbon rivals Benfica, where he promptly sacked 20 senior players, replacing them with youth players. This resulted in Benfica, the Eagles, winning the Portuguese league in 1960 and 1961, and they won the European Cup in 1961 and 1962, which brings me neatly to his curse. Now, wouldn't you celebrate a manager who had led your club to 2 domestic league titles and 2 European Cups, and discovered and mentored the football superstar Eusebio? Maybe, but not Benfica, not the board members. Following such phenomenal success, Guttman plucked up courage and asked for a modest pay rise. The directors did not feel that he deserved it and denied him the raise. Understandably angry, Guttman stormed out of the club saying, "Not in 100 years from now will Benfica ever be European champions." But it is these words that now haunt Benfica fans. The curse. The following year, Benfica reached their third consecutive European Cup final. And despite being the pre-match favourites, Benfica lost 2-1 to AC Milan. And since then, in each of the 7 other European finals that Benfica have reached, they have always lost. In the European Cup, they lost 1-0 to Inter Milan in 65, 4-1 after extra time to Manchester United in 68, 6-5 on penalties to PSV Eindhoven after the 1988 final ended 0-0, and 1-0 to AC Milan in 1990. In the UEFA Cup, or the Europa League, they lost 2-1 on aggregate to Anderlecht in 83, 2-1 to Chelsea in 2013, and 4-2 on penalties to Sevilla after the 2014 final ended 0-0. So, is the curse real? Needless to say that the curse is believed by many, to the extent that before the 1990 European Cup final against AC Milan in Vienna, where Guttman is buried, Benfica legend Eusebio went to the grave of his former manager to pray for the curse to be lifted. That didn't clearly work. Next slide, please. There's no doubt that Guttman's curse hangs heavily on the psyche of Benfica's players and supporters. Of course, it can become self-fulfilling. If every time they reach a major European final, they believe the game will be lost because of the curse. No doubt it was just a throwaway line that he spat out at the time. But it's a long time until 2062 for Benfica fans to have to wait. Okay, next slide, and you know how to press the button a few times here, CJ.
I do indeed. Here we go.
Dead cat bounce.
Marmalade, get down.
No, it's not your cat.
No. No. He was climbing on my computer, sorry. Right, let's go back. So, previous. Oh, we could do that again, couldn't we? Because that was fun.
Go on.
I'm quite enjoying this.
Well, I'm not going to say anymore. Okay.
Did you see that, Marmalade? Okay. Sorry.
Are you sitting comfortably?
Yep.
Okay. Football in Argentina is... No.
Oh, sorry. We go back.
You just want to go back and play that again, don't you? Yes. Football in Argentina is virtually a religion. Indeed, the Church of Maradona is a religion that worships football superstar Diego Maradona. The church's symbol of, well, I say Dios, it's a D, a 1, a 0, and an S, combines the Spanish word for gods, Dios, and Maradona's football shirt, number 10. Maradona scored against England in the 1986 World Cup finals by punching the ball into the net, claiming it was the hand of God. How prescient. But there is a dark side. And this often relates to football gang violence. Argentinian football gangs are amongst the world's most dangerous fans. In 10 years to 2011, an estimated 190 people died in football-related incidents. In 2002, 5 people were killed and many left with gunshot and knife wounds, causing the government to declare violence in football a national emergency. Some of the Barra Bravas gang members claim to run guns and drugs through the stands during the matches. In 2017, at a local derby, a 22-year-old Belgrano fan was accused of being a fan of arch rivals Teleles when amongst fellow Belgrano supporters. He was beaten and thrown from the stand to the terraces below, later dying of his injuries. Much of the violence takes place in the streets as rival barras fight for control through firefights, drive-by shootings, and mafia-style executions. Yeah, it makes Millwall look quite tame, doesn't it? Yes. Now, next slide, please. The big 5 clubs in Argentina are Boca Juniors, Independiente, Racing, River Plate, and San Lorenzo de Almagro. They collectively account for almost 86% of the total Argentine fan base. They're all based in Greater Buenos Aires, with Independiente and Racing in the working class area of Avellaneda. Rivalry between Independiente and Racing goes back over a century. Independiente have a red strip, apparently inspired by a touring Nottingham Forest. Racing play in the blue and white colours of the Argentine flag from 1910 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the May Revolution. Racing dominated Argentinian football, winning 7 consecutive league titles between 1913 and 1919, losing just 5 games and earning themselves the nickname La Academia, the Academy, because of the lessons handed out to opponents. Success meant a bigger stadium was needed. Over the following years, each club had periods when it was successful in winning trophies. So these are the 2 grounds, Independiente at the back and Racing's at the front, showing their colours. And they're quite close to one another. And when it's a local derby, they have prescribed routes to get opposing fans to where they're supposed to actually sit or stand without actually being attacked. So, what's the 7 dead cat curse of Racing Club? Independiente were league champions in 1963 and won the Copa Libertadores. I wish I was good at speaking Spanish. I do apologize to those of you out there who are listening to this garbled pronunciation. Copa Libertadores, which is the equivalent of the European Cup, in 1964 and 1965. Both of these wins had them play the European Cup winners for the Intercontinental Cup, which would today be called the World Cup. But they lost on each occasion to Inter Milan. Racing won the league in 1966 and then went on to win the Copa Libertadores in 1967. They played Celtic for the 1968 Intercontinental Cup. Celtic won 1-0 in Glasgow before Racing won the second leg 2-1 in Buenos Aires, with the Celtic players, quote, attacked mentally and physically by Racing and their fans, end quote. This set up a playoff in Montevideo, Uruguay. Racing won the playoff 1-0. The match was so violent, 6 players were sent off, 2 from Racing and 4 from Celtic, that it was called the Battle of Montevideo and branded a disgrace on both sides of the Atlantic. It's on YouTube, and I can recommend it as good viewing, if you're of that sort of bent towards old-fashioned football, which I am, being old-fashioned in that sense. Independiente fans were a bit miffed at their rivals achieving what their team had failed to do twice. So while the district of Avellaneda was in total chaos with the Racing fans celebrating their title, Independiente supporters broke into Racing Stadium and buried 7 dead black cats in a ritual supposed to cast a curse on their rivals. Surely this wouldn't work. Well, Racing's fortunes went downhill immediately, and they didn't win another title for 34 years. In fact, racing's form went downhill each year, and they narrowly avoided relegation in 1976 by a single point. In 1980, the new manager, convinced about the curse, insisted club members dig out all the dead cats and replace them with toads. They found 6 cats' bodies and duly replaced them with 6 dead toads. Apparently, toads are something that can ward off witchcraft. But one cat was still buried, and so racing's bad luck continued. They were relegated and declared bankrupt in 1983. So clearly the toad magic had not worked. In 1988, an exorcism was performed with around 100,000 people filling Racing Stadium to watch a priest pour holy water all over the ground. This didn't work either. The club had another financial crisis in 1999 and was saved by a private company. In 2001, the new head coach insisted the pitch be dug up again, plus the concrete area around it, to find the 7th dead cat. Its body was found in the concrete. It might be possibly a coincidence, but that very same year, 34 years after winning the Intercontinental Cup, Racing won the Argentinian League again. Okay, next slide, please. So that's my talk about strange sports and football curses and so on. And I didn't get around to talking about donkey basketball. I'd never heard of it, but when I was talking about or exchanging emails about strange sports with Jan Brunvan, the urban legends whiz over in Utah in America, he said, "You think that's strange? Have you heard about donkey basketball?" And I admitted that I hadn't, but there's actually quite a lot on the in the internet, and it's done for charity usually. But some people claim that it's abuse of animals and so on. So I don't know if CJ has got any slides for this or
yeah. Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Otherwise, I will then go on to questions and answers.
Sorry about the adverts.
Of this and a lot more peace of mind. Move along, viruses. Switch to built-in virus.
How do I? Video will play after ad. Here we go.
Spring is having a hard time warming up, so tonight we're heading inside for an unusual sport. Thanks for joining us on the rally. I'm Mike Patton.
I'm Frank Vassalero. Well said, Maxie. It's a popular way to raise money for a good cause, but it is unusual. It's donkey basketball.
And tonight it was about helping the future farmers of America and the new London Spicer area. Here's David McCoy.
They call it donkey basketball, but you could just as easily
It's not on, CJ.
You know what I mean?
Is it not on?
See some people use this the place to do it.
If you want to...
Oh, how annoying. Sorry, let me try that again. I'll take it back to the beginning. Right, share screen. Where's it coming up? Here it is. Right, let's try it here.
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Well, I can see something, certainly.
Okay, let's play. This is donkey basketball.
Tonight we're heading inside for an unusual sport. Thanks for joining us on the rally. I'm Mike Patton.
I'm Frank Vassalero. Well said, Maxie. It's a popular way to raise money for a good cause, but it is unusual. It's donkey basketball.
And tonight it was about helping the future farmers of America and the new London Spicer area. Here's David McCoy.
They call it donkey basketball, but you could just as easily drop the B, if you know what I mean.
If you want to come see some people get abused, this is the place to do it.
If you want to see someone throw down a slam donkey, this probably isn't the place.
We don't have a lot of points scored in donkey ball. It's the lowest scoring event.
Just keep the ball and go for layups. That's probably our best bet.
Actually, your best bet is just trying not to fall on your... Especially if you get one as stubborn as Latrell Sprewell.
If your donkey won't do what you're asking him to do, it's not because he is stubborn or some people mistakenly translate that into stupid. It's because he's decided your idea is dumb.
or stupid, and he's not going to participate.
You can't tell a donkey what to do. You think you can control it, but there's no controlling a donkey.
This lady wrapped in bubble wrap might be the smartest one here.
Bucket list. Nailed it.
It is all for a good cause, not only to raise money for the FFA chapter, but also for the local food shelf. Because apparently having a bake sale isn't exciting enough when the brownies can't kick you in the leg.
Just go with the flow. Just go with it.
So much of it is luck. I'm pretty sure the people that don't play basketball are going to be the ones that make all the baskets.
But no matter how many baskets you make, the biggest key to the game is simply to avoid making a donkey out of yourself.
There's no way to avoid it.
I think that's the whole point of tonight, is to make sure we get a laugh out of people. That's why they came.
That's why we came anyway. David McCoy, WCCO4 Sports.
All kinds of ad-libs we could add to that, and we won't.
My mind is reeling. Although I didn't see David on the donkey.
I kept waiting for that as the money shot.
How do I turn this off? Hang on. Okay, well...
I think the rat basketball sounded better.
Rat basketball. I was hoping the world is ready for that yet, but that was donkey basketball. So thank you very much. Did you manage to see that, everyone, in the end?
Yep.
Yeah? Did everybody else see it? Right, okay, well, I haven't lost my hat, so, because my evil cat keeps trying to steal my dinner. Oh, no, stop now. So, I will pop back on and come back in. Thank you ever so much for tonight's talk. That was really kind of...
No problem. I mean, you've got that wonderful vision behind you. I say I have a season ticket for Wolverhampton Wanderers in that very stand, the stand colours.
So, we've got a few questions or a few comments. We don't have any questions. Tent pegging, that just sounds wrong.